Welcome, everybody. So when we do these interviews, like I hate doing I mean, everybody knows, hit like and subscribe. I'm not, yeah, there you go. I'm not. So Patrick, you do something very interesting. You only open Coffin Nation occasionally so that you don't have to ask for and do a grift at the beginning of every interview. That's why you do that, right?
Well, you might be referring to the podcast, the Patrick Coffin Show, which has been going since 2016 when I left the previous employer that shall remain nameless, although it is Catholic Answers Live. So I've got, I don't know, 390 shows in the can, and I'm trying to have mercy on my audience. So when I first started, I had this elaborate, semi-pompous, overproduced music with a voiceover, la la. If you're a regular listener, you hate that crap. You just, show me the beef, right? So
Yeah.
I've streamlined it. People pretty much know the routine about hit, like, and subscribe. But then I organized the second of a summit series called Truth Over Fear with Bobby Kennedy Jr., whom I've interviewed 3 times, and now he's running for president. It's crazy. Dr. Peter McCullough, the late Zev Zelenko, Dr. Ryan Cole, attorney Reiner Filmic, all the people that were fighting against the COVID. Can I say bullshittery? Is that wrong?
Yeah.
No, go for it.
Yeah. It's too late. Welcome to live broadcast. And for that, I got a permanent ban from YouTube after we launched. Like an hour into it, I got an email from YouTube QT saying that I was I'm gone in violation of their own terms. So I'm not litigious minded. I've been around the legal mulberry bush a couple of times, but we just decided to move on to Rumble and other platforms. So, forget YouTube. If Catholics are not getting banned by YouTube, there's something going wrong. So I always encourage this.
We've been trying to work around like certain things. So like when we speak about the people of the old covenant, we've been calling them Amish because we figure the Amish don't have technology.
So they won't get mad.
They won't get mad. And there's no anti-Amish defamation league. So we just refer to them as Amish. So far, we've only gotten 2 strikes. One of them we were able to get rescinded. So we're skirting a very fine line. And then I'm pretty sure eventually we're going to wind up over at Rumble. But so I really wanted to get you on, Patrick, because I've been, since my reversion, and I'd say maybe 2007, I've been following your work, right? Like I followed you over at Catholic Answers, but you really came into your own when you started doing interviews, like on your own platform. And I've admired your interview style more than I would even say you're one of the best interviewers in media, not just Catholic media.
Oh, well, thank you, Anthony. Thank you.
Yeah, the amount of prep you do is like you thoroughly read the book before you bring somebody on. Even during the COVID thing that you were just speaking about, all these people that went crazy when Joe Rogan had a few people on, like they were on your platform first.
Yeah.
You really made these people known, and then they would go on these bigger platforms and everybody would make a big stink out of it. Yeah. And nobody stood taller than you did during COVID. Like,
well, thank you. Yeah. Mr. Rogan deserves he needs to write me a check for all the heavy hitters that I'm joking. I want there to be 100 Patrick Coffin shows and Joe Rogan's. So this is not about protecting fiefdom. I'm honored that people bounce from me to somewhere else. And Joe Rogan has broken a lot of ceilings and has kind of deconstructed some myths about podcasts. And this is something I had some conversations with Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo came back after his fall from grace in 2017 or so on my show. I'd never talked to him before. And that was over 2 hours. And then we did another show, 3 hours, 52 minutes. And I said, Milo, it's too long. People's attention span. He said, it's not true. Movies are longer. Books are longer. It's not true. If your stuff's good, they're going to keep listening to it. And he's right. And Rogan's, I think his average is like 3 hours. And if you don't have time at that moment, then you go back and you treat it like, something episodic. So great.
Even as our show develops, it's like I had to make decisions based on like, okay, do you want to play this? Do you want to play this safe? Or do you just want to have conversations with people you find very interesting? And that's the route I'm trying to take. Just people that I find very interesting and I think that are really good at conversations. I know I'm going to catch heat. I mean, I caught more heat for having Tim Gordon on than anybody, I think, because Tim is, Tim is Tim, and he says things in a certain way. But the past few weeks, I've just watched everybody come down on you, where it was a strange thing, because even Matt Fradd had Calvin Robinson on, and Calvin Robinson mentioned your book on contraception in that interview.
Yeah,
and Matt Fradd seemed to recoil, and he said, "Well, I used to have this friend. Well, I suppose he's still my friend." And I just see that how everybody is afraid to be associated with somebody who holds a different opinion than them on the current situation we're in, and it's a strange thing for me to witness.
The magic word is associated. Our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ wasn't afraid to be associated with hookers and the worst sinners. He knew he was not going to be ideologically tainted because he spent time with or interacted with people with whom he had nothing in common. I'm a Catholic, so I believe in logos. I believe in discourse, dialogue, debate, discussion. Let's let the marketplace of ideas filter things out. Adults don't like censorship. So what happened with the Hope is Fuel Catholic on Purpose course is something you and I've talked a little bit about offline, and that's Mimetic Desire. We can get into that a little bit. But
I definitely want to.
Yeah, it explains office gossip. It explains the scapegoating mechanism. It explains overnight lineups for stupid movie premieres. It explains, Black Friday hysteria. This is all Mimetic Desire. And people get on a bandwagon. And when they hear the words, "Oh, I don't want to be associated with X," they give X all this power rather than burst the bubble and say, "Hey, I don't need to get personal," because a lot of the people who backed out, sadly, were friends of mine. You have my number.
Yeah.
Why are you accepting what is said of me and actually leaving the event that you already you committed to it, and you did an outstanding interview? You want me to? Okay, I'll take it off. No problem. But the associated. If I had to agree with everyone with whom I shared a platform at a conference, I couldn't get on an airplane. That would be it. So
it's a strange thing, because I mean, in my regular life, I'm friends with atheists. I'm friends with, I have Muslim friends. I work at a company. I don't disassociate from somebody because they have a different ideology or a different opinion on. So really what irked me about this whole thing, the movement against you, is I assumed it was the Dawn Edens and Mike Lewis's, is what I assumed. But John Zmirak came out and wrote an article and admitted in the article that I've been running around calling people. And I'm like, well, John Zmirak, you are you are constantly on Eric Metaxas's show, which I like Eric Metaxas. But if you asked Eric Metaxas his idea of what his opinion on the Pope is, what do you think that would be? So why is it a problem to be associated with Patrick but not Eric Metaxas? It makes no sense.
How about define the terms of your complaint? How about invite me on your show and debate me? Yeah. If I'm wrong on anything, I want to know about it. It's one of the great things about being Catholic is you get to be corrected. You don't have to keep inventing the wheel. I'm not the magisterium. I've got a laptop. I've got my dog Scout. I've got some research skills, and I'm very, very curious. And just open the lines of communication. But that takes a little bit of courage, and most people, well, let me finish this sentence by mentioning a guest who's one of my favorites. Happens to be Jewish, happens to be the Democrat operative, Dr. Naomi Wolf, who's one of the outstanding figures in fighting all this tyranny and the digital ID stuff. Naomi Wolf called all of it early in terms of, look, the digital ID and all the passport stuff has nothing to do with your health, nothing to do with COVID, and everything to do with gathering data on you. She wrote a Substack that I always send people to. It's called, "I'm Not Brave, You're a Pussy."
Yeah. Yeah, it's so weird. Naomi Wolf, first off, that interview. Okay, we have to really, because the interviews you do are so outstanding. I did not even know who E. Michael Jones was. I had heard of him in passing as a Catholic, but I never really understood any of his work until I saw you interview him. After watching you interview him on Logos Rising, I went and bought Logos Rising. I then went and bought Libido Dominandi. I then went and bought Baron Metal. E. Michael Jones is one of the most brilliant thinkers in the Catholic world. Now, I don't agree with him on everything. And even the label he's getting of an anti-Semite, I just think that people love to throw labels on something and they're not really even listening to what the man is actually saying. I don't believe he's never encouraged any kind of like violence of any kind. He's never encouraged any kind of retaliation of any kind. He's really just explaining what happens when you reject Logos.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like
there's even there's a caveat on the website, hopesfield.com. Please note, disclaimer, none of these speakers are presumed to agree with Patrick Coffin or with any of the other speakers here on this course. Apparently not enough. So not only the EMJ thing, but also that the accusation that I'm a sedevacantist. This one's really funny because I kept saying, here's why I'm not a sedevacantist. And the reply to the Twitter mob was, only a sedevacantist would deny he's a sedevacantist. You sedevacantist. So I just decided, I wrote an email, basically an apology email for some of the pride-tainted replies that I was making. And someone I respect a lot, who I don't want to name because he's very humble, but he gave me an image of the way I was responding reminded him of Peter taking his sword out during the garden when Jesus is getting arrested. And I took that to prayer, and I've given a lot of thought to that little scene. So Jesus later in Luke's gospel says, hey, look, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy a sword. So he's endorsing carry, right? Jesus is not a pacifist. And so when the temple guards arrive, they're armed to the hilt with, pardon the metaphor, with swords. So Peter's there, he's got a sword. Jesus never told him to never carry a sword. He's wearing a sword. He sees these guys come in. There's Judas. He knows it's going down. Peter's like, not on my watch. He draws the sword, game on. I'm not going to let you arrest him. Takes a whack at Malchus's head, slices his ear off. And our Lord at this point heals Malchus's ear and then says, Peter, put your sword back in its sheath. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. Why would Jesus say that? Isn't it courageous of Peter to draw his sword? Yes, it is. But Jesus' message to Peter in that moment is, your enemies want you to fight a certain way. You don't have to fight the way your enemies want you to fight. Because in that moment, our Lord knew that in about 18 hours from that moment, he was going to be hanging on a cross for 3 hours. And that was going to be the final victory that didn't involve a sword. In fact, it involved an apparent catastrophic failure. Our faith is based on an apparent catastrophic failure. And from that moment, I put my sword back. No more snarky replies. No more explaining that I'm not a sedevacantist. No more defending. And that's when I had really great peace. And I just left all of it into God's hands.
I got two things from that whole thing. Okay. First off, Patrick, I love you are one of my favorite people to listen to have a conversation. You're also one of the most awful people on Twitter I've ever encountered. Like your text.
Thank you.
A gift. It's a gift. My favorite one-word reply to pretty much everything that I despise is just gay.
Dude, you're so bad. Like everything. And I love you. That's the funny thing. It's like you're somebody who I enjoy listening to so much. And then when I see you on Twitter, I'm like, I don't know if he knows how bad he's coming off here or what. It's like he's just awful at Twitter. But
certified bad on Twitter.
Yeah. The other thing I want to say is, though, so we had a guy named Joshua Charles on with us the other day, who is Mike Pence's former speechwriter, New York Times bestselling author. And we've been talking a lot about this is you've been speaking to Dr. Edward Mazza. Yep. Right? You've had conversation. Now, do you hold to his whole catacomb thesis or really just the resignation thesis with him?
This is a very complicated question because the answer requires a little bit of backdrop. I interviewed Dr. Mazza in September 2021, I think. And I had been working, just trying to connect dots about Bergoglio for a couple of years because I was weirded out. I was weirded out from night number one when he came onto the loggia with those weird glasses and his little bland hand and saying, Buonasera. And there over his left shoulder is Cardinal Gottfried Daniels, who was a homosexualist pro-abortion prelate who destroyed the church in Antwerp, Belgium. One of the St. Gallen Mafia. In fact, he's the one who gave it the nickname, the St. Gallen Mafia. I thought, why is this guy invited onto this global photo op. And then, of course, we were off to the races. Oh, he wears brown shoes. He's really humble. Not those mean red shoes that Pope Benedict had. And then him allying himself with all the enemies of Christ. And I mean, it's a long list of things that I began to be very troubled about. But then one inciting incident was the decision on the part of Bergoglio to remove the Vicar of Christ from the Annuario, the Vatican's yearbook in 2020. I thought, okay, I can't square this circle. He doesn't want to be called Vicar of Christ. So when I began to learn the history of anti-popes, and here's a pope in our own era renouncing the term, I thought, well, maybe he knows he's not the pope, or maybe he thinks he is, but he's not. That's what led me to put a whole bunch of data together, and I was happy to do a video that ruined my life as a Catholic, made me a pariah, called 7 Pieces of Evidence that Francis is an anti-pope. And I learned a lot from Dr. Mazza. He's a clear thinker. He's humble. He's funny. He can quote all kinds of pop culture, flotsam and jetsam. So I agree with him that the resignation by Pope Benedict was not valid. Where I disagree with him and some other people in I was going to call it the BIP, but I guess it would be BWP. Benedict was Pope. Is that I don't believe that he did it by accident. I don't think there was a substantial error in his phrasing of the Declaratio. The Declaratio is the 2-paragraph document that Benedict wrote on his walnut desk. Took him 2 weeks. He's got a pen. This is a man who thought and dreamed and lectured in Latin for decades at the PhD level. There's no way that he would resign the papacy without resigning the office of the papacy. And the magic word he needed to use, according to Canon 332.2, is munus, which means gift or office. He does not renounce it. Unlike Richard Milhouse Nixon, who did renounce the office of the presidency in one sentence. You can see the PDF online. That's a legitimate resignation. And I keep saying, don't believe what Patrick Coffin says. Who cares what my opinion is? But at least follow the canons of the Catholic Church, because they're binding. And we can go off into.
Well, the reason I was asking is because Dr. Mazza holds that Benedict was the restrainer spoken of in Thessalonians.
Yeah, the Cajetan. Yeah,
right.
He is a restrainer. I agree with that thesis.
Right. So now Joshua Charles comes on with us the other day, and he made so look, even if I may not agree with the resignation thing, and I'm not saying I don't, I'm saying I'm a layperson, a high school dropout. I'm not smart enough to make this decision. But what Benedict did seemed very intentional, that he was laying down the sword, just like you spoke about in the garden, right? Like it seemed like he was laying down the sword, and because he even spoke of having this prayer experience before he had the resignation, almost like Christ was telling him, lay down your sword and allow what's going to happen. And it's something that really kind of clicked on me. And like you were just saying, he's a restrainer, not the restrainer. And I see something very symbolically important also in Paul VI laying down his tiara, where there's something about the papacy being a restraining force against evil in our midst. And that was a conversation that we just had with Joshua Charles. That's why I was curious, especially when you brought that specific story up between Jesus and Peter in the garden. It's just a lot of these things are very striking. I think you're right that Benedict, whether he was successful in his resignation or not, his intention was to only resign part of it.
Yeah, he did resign the ministerium. But I don't believe it was a result of an internal subjective error that he carried in his mind, that the papacy could be bifurcated between munus and ministerium. You don't need that thesis to explain what he did. You just need to read what he wrote. And what he wrote lacks the proper canonical form for a valid resignation. That's the kill shot. I don't care so much about the St. Gallen Mafia and the canonical crimes of the conclave. We could do 9 hours just on that. On the crimes they committed that they brag about publicly are explicitly condemned by John Paul II in 1996 in an apostolic constitution called Universi Dominici Gregis. Again, don't believe Patrick Coffin, but I mean, section 79 to 81 of UDG lays down the penalty for doing this. And the penalty is automatic excommunication for the people who schmooze and treat the papal office like a political office, vote block and so on, politic. And also the man who assents to it, all would be excommunicated. But you don't even need that. I agree with that, but you don't need it. because the kill shot is upstream, and that is the declaratio. It's even misnamed, Anthony. One more horse out of the barn. It should have been called the renunciatio.
Yeah.
So I would recommend, if people are avid readers and they're curious about this, to check out The Ratzinger Code by Andrea Cionci, Cionci. Cionci is an Italian researcher, art historian, and he analyzed every line of what Pope Benedict said after February 2013. And he finds in it ample evidence that the Holy Father spoke in kind of parables. He never lies. He uses some mental reservations. For instance, Pete Shaywald asks him in 2016, Holy Father, some people are upset by your resignation. They claim that you didn't really resign. How do you respond? And the Holy Father said, yes, some of my friends are angry at the decision I made, which I made freely. But I tell you, there is but one Pope.
He doesn't say Francis is that Pope.
He does this all the time.
Yeah.
This is a common thing. Why did he wear the white papal cassock? Well, he tells Andrea Tornielli in 2014, well, there was no black cassock to be had at the time.
Yeah.
Rome has 10 clerical stores within walking distance. And by the way, the last 10 years of his life, he never presented himself anything other than the actual office holder of the Pope. The white papal zucchetto, he's called His Holiness. He basically retained this. So this is my California driver's license. I could renounce driving in California. I could write a letter to the world. Hey, world, I'm no longer driving in California, I promise. And I could never drive again. But until I hand in that card, I retain the right to drive. And the word, even the word Pope Emeritus, it's canonical, it's anti-canonical word salad. It doesn't mean what people think it means. Emeritus in Latin means he who merits the office. It doesn't mean old retired guy, he who merits the office. And that was his phrase to describe his status.
It's one that he chose. I mean, it's like, look, whether, okay, so I think the times are so confusing, right? Like there's so many different things going on that I think that anybody who just comes off and says Francis is the Pope, and anybody who says otherwise is blah, 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 blah. It's like, how can you not have empathy for people who are looking at the scenario in the church right now and not saying something is off? Like something is drastically off, right? Like I've been taught my entire life how marriage is an emblem of the divine, that God is a Trinity, and that the family and marriage and all these things. And then you have Francis come out with Amoris Laetitia saying that people, and starting to mess around with the idea of marriage. Not, it's like these things are just so blatant when he makes his comments about breeding like rabbits and who am I to judge. I mean, there's the list of things that Francis has done to purposely confuse people. And then when people act like, how are you confused? I find that the most shocking position.
Yeah. Trads and conservative Catholics are world champions at trying to square the circle. Proselytization is bad. Don't become Catholic. That's, it's not what Jesus would do. Jesus was nice. You're mean by encouraging people to become Catholic. Host the head of Moderna and Pfizer at Vatican conferences. Describe Emma Bonino, the premier abortionist pioneer in Italy. I call her a national treasure. Meet with Kate Perry and Leo DiCaprio, but leave Cardinal Burke and the Dubia Cardinals. Ignore them. Leave Cardinal Zen out in the cold. Ally yourself with all of the enemies of previous popes and reject people who exhibit really fervent Catholic evangelical spirit, like people who go to the traditional Latin Mass. So I just decided that there's one option that fits all the facts. And I no longer call Bergoglio, satanic, hypermodernist, globalist, communist. I think he's all those things. But when you say the word anti-pope, people freak out, even though we've had 30 anti-popes, like anything but that. So,
yeah, it's a strange one. And what I really don't like is when people say, by discussing these issues, you're pushing people out of the church, because I'm going to tell you right now, I left the church after Amoris Laetitia for 2 years. And you want to know what brought me back in? A conversation you had with Taylor Marshall and Timothy Gordon called Red Pilled on Francis. And seeing the three of you sit and have a conversation, and I didn't feel like I was crazy anymore, because I was watching everybody Pope-splain away all of these things for for years at this point.
Yeah.
And it was really, really freaking me out. And then that show made me go, okay, these are some mainstream guys willing to say, okay, something is off here. Because even during the Benedict papacy, like when he would he made the comment one time about like there could be a scenario where if somebody wore a condom, it actually could be the first inkling that they're going towards something more. He's talking about somebody who had HIV. If they wore a condom, it was actually a step towards doing something moral, and the media twisted it around. So of course we would defend Benedict in that scenario. But what they were doing with Francis was trying to make it like something he said that was just so off, and trying to make it sound normal. And it's like, guys, please, I'm not crazy. Stop it. Don't talk to me like an idiot.
Yeah, establishment professional Catholics are trying to square a circle that you can't square, and trying to domesticate a problem. Like explaining away your drunk uncle who's ruined the party. Oh, he's just not feeling well. No, he's drunk and ruining the party, and it's not a sin to say so. Do you know who John Gravino is?
No.
John would be a good guest for your show. John wrote, now John and I disagree on the papal evidence, but he has an excellent short book called Confronting the Pope of Suspicion. And John's thesis is that Amoris Laetitia, which was another kind of red pill moment for me, Amoris Laetitia is the codification in a magisterial document of all the 1960s and 70s era dissent. It puts in writing all of the dissent principles of the sexual revolution and the Catholic left. He explicitly says that the Argentine bishop's letter on the matter, that yes, there are some circumstances in which civilly divorced and remarried Catholics can receive Holy Communion. Well, that's material heresy. That goes against what Christ reveals, both in the Gospels and in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and 11. You can't, they don't fit together. And that letter from the Argentine bishop, this is kind of mind-blowing too. You may have heard the phrase AAS, the Acta Apostolica Sedis. It's like the official vault of magisterial teaching. Anything that ends up in the AAS is certified, okay, this is what the church really teaches. That letter, which has no authority, is put up into the AAS by Bergoglio. That doesn't work. And it's not a sin, and it's not disobedient to say so. You know who used to get tagged by this all the time is Robert Spencer of Jihad Watch. I've interviewed Robert a bunch of times. And if he says, look, a Muslim beheaded a guy in broad daylight, that's Islamophobia. Well, no, I just pointed out what that guy did. Yeah. So it's messenger shooting.
So like, I think somebody was asking, okay, so like, what is the, like, I kind of fall in the, I'm pretty agnostic about a lot of the things going on right now. Like, I just don't know, but I do think it's going to take an act of divine providence to get, here's what it is. I'm going to tell a story that I don't know if I probably should. I'm going to leave out a lot of details of this because it was something that really happened on Sunday, and it was so upsetting to me that it just kind of shows the state of the church in general right now. So we were at Mass on Sunday. I was there for my friend's daughter's first communion. Mm-hmm. Now, my friend's wife, her father, so his father-in-law had a heart attack during the homily and was rushed out during the homily. There are 3 priests at this parish. Mm-hmm. Not one of the priests thought to go and give this man extreme unction. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And he was just taken away. And it was just such an upsetting thing to me that everyone was just thinking on the natural sense. And out of those 3 priests that were there, not one of them went. It's almost like we're in a state of the church where, especially after COVID, where you saw they took the sacraments away from us. It's like I don't know if
there's no supernatural faith, it seems.
Right. Like there's a total lack of supernatural faith in the sacraments themselves. And I was really devastated about this whole thing the whole day. I was like, I don't understand. Like, why would no priest go out and that should be the first thing before you call the ambulance. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you're looking at this situation in the church, and it's just like, I just feel like everyone just is so quick to defend their position without really thinking about the wider scale of what's really going on in the wider church right now. So David L. Gray does a talk for the Hope is Fuel conference. Yeah. He actually just asked a question. He said, does the cardinal electors who Francis has created have the authority to elect a new pope? The question relates to the logical conclusion. So that's one I haven't heard you actually address yet.
Yeah, it's a good question. The answer would be No. An anti-pope can't elevate a cardinal, and he can't canonize anybody. So that follows from the premises.
So do you think there are people in the hierarchy right now that have a strong enough, that have the gumption to even declare Francis an anti-pope? Like I feel like people are so afraid right now, they'll just keep going along and go. Like it really will take an act of divine intervention, right?
Yeah, I think divine intervention has to accompany acts of courage like that. And I also think it's going to get worse. It has to come to a really terrible, unavoidably catastrophic crisis where people go, okay, let's go down. This is like the alcoholic who hits like absolute rock bottom where the only direction is up. One possible way forward among others, and I'm not a canon lawyer, I'm not a church historian, but I do know that the cardinals that were appointed by Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict, they're dwindling in numbers now, they could meet and hold an imperfect synod, which is what happened in the Council of Sutri, I think the 11th century, SUTRI. It's a very interesting parallel. They're certifying that the Holy Father Benedict was the true Pope, and therefore the Argentine is an anti-pope. That could be authoritatively announced and declared. Whether they have the spine to do it, whether there's curiosity enough about that option, and whether they know the evidence that I'm trying to put together. I mean, I feel like I want to hand over my cache of evidence to smarter people who have more insider connections. I mean, I know I'm very blessed to have interviewed Cardinal Burke many times, Cardinal Francis Arinze. I don't know the other Doobie Cardinals. I don't have any personal contact with them. There's a retired Archbishop from Poland, Cardinal Archbishop Lenga, who's fully on board. The retired Bishop of Corpus Christi, Texas, Bishop Rene Henry Garcia, who just turned 100. He was on my show a couple of years ago talking about this. It takes a lot of courage to go against the mob, to go like upstream, like a single salmon against the groovy spirit of the times. But our Lord has always worked through this remnant small minority of the faithful. And I don't say that in a prideful way. I'm a sinner. I have many problems. I'm a work in progress. But for some reason, the scales have fallen from my eyes, and I just had an ability to see this. And I say in my first video, there's going to be a lot of angry people here. And I got put on the you know what list, and I'm sure that people are they want to join that bad association bandwagon. But once you decide just to let your hair down and tell the truth, you know this, Anthony. I sleep at night. I'm not upset. When I call them the professional hand wringers. Like, oh, do you see what Pope Francis said yesterday? They're going to like break their wrists. My answer is, what do you expect? You know?
Yeah, I almost don't care like when things start getting worse and worse, because it's like you said, like the whole thing has to come crashing down to it. We are so beyond any kind of natural saving of the church at this point. Like things are so messed up, especially if you do think about the people that have been elevated under this pontificate. I mean, you got McElroy and all these guys. Like there's no way that there's going to be some kind of natural solution at this point. I only see some kind of a divine intervention at this point. And I had to look. I really have had to think about what road we were going to take by having you on, because it's like, I know we're going to catch the guilt by association thing. And it does take a lot of courage to say, I really don't care what people think of me. It's like, I don't care what your opinion is of me. I am struggling with these things. I don't necessarily say, I just think I have to be humble about it because I am a layperson and a high school dropout. I don't think I have any qualifications to make any pronunciations on any of these things. So I just accept that the only answer is to stay within the bosom of the church for the time being. It's like, has your bishop or anybody reached out to you and said anything to you, or like, do you still go to a diocesan mass?
I do. I go to no one's reached out to me. No. Yeah. I asked people, please debate me on your show. It was like the week of shame. In the week after February 11th last year, just one podcast after another, blogger after blogger, people I know personally. This is sad and tragic. Poor Patrick, pray for the guy, like shaming me. Like, are you saying I'm crazy? Are you saying this is so beyond the pale that we can't even talk about it? The only guy that had the pair big enough to debate me was Tim Gordon. He had me on for 60 minutes on his show. We did a live debate, and it wasn't cantankerous or anything, but I'm grateful to Tim because he was able to ask all the hard questions that other people attack me on, and they assume there's no answer for. So I love like the question from David L. Gray. It's a very good follow-up question. John Henry Weston had me on the show either, and I don't think John Henry agrees with me either. But he's willing to say, well, let's clear the deck here. Let's get to first principles. Forget what is said about you. What's your real position? How'd you arrive at this?
Yeah.
And that's great.
Yeah, I think when people get irked by you're saying you're not a sedevacanist, they don't understand that the term sedevacanist has very big implications. They're talking about people who think the seat has been vacant since Pope Pius XII, and that there's been no pope ever since then. And right. I don't see how that's tenable. I do think that you're not crazy for coming to the conclusions that you've come to. Like it's definitely like it has to be something people actually do think about. They're also I just think that because things are so. Oh wait, here's something I did want to. Because I know you've taken a very strong stance against the SSPX in the past. Has your stance on that changed at all since your position you're in now?
Well, strong stance might be a reasonable conclusion based on the snark factor in some of my tweets on it. I regard the SSPX as being informal schism. I don't believe they're part of the Catholic Church. They have chapels, not parishes. They have districts, not dioceses. They don't follow anything that Rome says. On the other hand, this is a crazy upside down church under Bergoglio. And the people I have admired and said so, like Father Trevor Burfitt out here in California, he's an SSPX priest, basically the only man in a Roman collar that told Governor Hairgel to go pound sand. I admire that. It makes me wonder, where are our bishops with their satanic diaper face symbols of their own subjection to tyranny? Where you have this, the International Gay Fest known as the LA Rec. Everyone's masked up, and James Martin and all the LGBTQ LMNP people selling sodomy to the church, but no one's fighting the fact that the sacraments have been removed from us. Flipping up your laptop is been made into the equivalent of going to mass. Meanwhile, I can go to a grocery store and handle fruits and vegetables with no squirt. No one cares. But you need to be protected with hazmat gear from our Lord and Savior in the sacrament. So I admire the stances of people like the priests in the SSPX. I do. I wish more Catholic prelates had that in them. And I pray for reconciliation. And I'm probably 98% preferring the traditional Latin Mass. I love learning more about sacred tradition. There's a whole ocean to learn about sacred tradition that you might not be exposed to if you only go to the Nervus Ordo. So my inclination is to not like adjectives. I just want to be Catholic. I don't like the adjectivization of our faith. It just creates fiefdoms and, like I like the idea of unity in the church, but the church is not clans. The church is the body of Christ. There's already the premise of unity. We just need to get back to it. So strong stance. I mean, the same thing. I could say the same thing about Medjugorje. I'm convinced with moral certainty that Medjugorje is either a fraud or satanic. And I think there are parallels there. I wrote an essay if folks are interested in Culture Wars magazine called The Medjugorje Maze. So, but it's funny, if you stand up and say, I disagree with this for these reasons, it's kind of labeled, oh, he's kind of a hardliner. Oh, well.
See, my position, especially on people who attend the SSPX, because sometimes the hardest time I have with people are people who have a reverent Novus Ordo. And the reason why is because I feel like if somebody has a reverent Novus Ordo, they presume that most people have access to that. And that, like, it's really a liturgical wasteland out there if you really. So the church that this happened at yesterday, that situation I told you about with the man having a heart attack, this is an Orthodox preaching parish, but it's I mean, they sang Amazing Grace and America the Beautiful at this mass, at this specific mass. They have altar girls all over the sanctuary. I watched somebody drop the communion hose. It's like, so I do think a lot of people that go to the SSPX are not going because they think they're the true church or anything. They're going because they want to make sure that their children receive an Orthodox teaching of the faith, and they want to really not deform their spiritual life.
That's very understandable impulse with which I'm sympathetic.
Yeah. Do we have questions from anybody in the audience? Because I would love to see if you guys, if there's something that I'm not asking that you guys would like me to ask. Pat, have you had more people step back in to fill some of the spots, or are you still getting people still dropping out?
Oh, no. The whole course dropped on Our Lady Help of Christians on May 24th, and we're gonna add more speakers. Once word got out that this mimetic desire train of wanting to flee, once that kind of got out there into the ether zone, I had people asking me, please include me. This is appalling.
Yeah.
I could go down the litany of people who backed out for really silly reasons. Why these otherwise smart people would do an unforced error against their own reputations, as they have to own that. But
I'll say something about the mimetic desire thing. The mimetic desire thing, like there is something. Look, if we are going to be coming up on persecution, which I mean, if you guys are paying attention to the culture, they've found a way to make Christianity evil with the rainbow stuff. I mean, they've found a way to make it like we're the evil ones. We're going to be facing persecution. If you're unwilling to stand up to the Dawn Edens of the world and say, yeah, I don't care. I'm putting my thing up over there. What are they? It's like, if you can't stand up to that, what do you think you're going to do when you're really faced with a question of, okay, either spit on this photo of Jesus or we're going to put you in some kind of a prison or something like that? I don't understand what people's thought process is. Yeah,
that's a difference in degree, not a difference in kind. Did I see a meme that you put, some like souls in hell screaming? At least I didn't offend people.
Yeah.
Feel good.
Yeah, because a lot of people do think. Look, that I'm telling you, me and Rob tried to go the route of not offending people for a while, and it's like we did okay, but
it was hard.
It is hard. It's like you want to have conversations with interesting people, and the non-offensive people are not very interesting. They're just very milquetoast, and it's like I feel like the time for fence sitting is really going to be coming to a close pretty soon. Yeah. So I would like to just have conversations with people who are actually seeing the same things I'm seeing and understanding that this crisis is unique in church history. It's nothing like we've ever encountered before.
It's got the whiff of the apocalyptic thing. I'm not a big end times bandwagon guy, but this is not just bad Pope territory. Here's a kind of bad Pope I could get behind, like a Medici Pope or a Borgia Pope, where he's, morally reprobate. He buys hookers on Thursday. On Friday, he's, drunk as a skunk. But on Sundays, he preaches magnificently and writes awesome encyclicals. So, but he doesn't tinker with the standard of the gospel. That's a bad Pope, okay?
Yeah.
We haven't had very many, but the Holy Spirit can work through a bad Pope. This is weaponized ambiguity. This is targeting the deposit of faith itself. This is actively discouraging people to convert. This is actively going after to try to torpedo one of the highest octane sources of Catholic orthodoxy, which is the traditional Latin Mass. Ask yourself, why is this attack going on? How else do you understand it? Because we're the ship of bad Pope is left a long time ago. So mimetic desire. Do you want to hit that a little bit?
Yeah, please. Because I had heard that term before, but really, like after hearing you speak about it with Tim Gordon, I actually went and I started looking up. What is it, Rene Gerard or
Rene Gerard? Yeah.
I started looking up a couple explainers. So please,
Rene Gerard was a French philosopher. He ended up teaching at literature in Stanford University for 40 years. He's been dead 10 years or so. One of his interpreters, or someone who's kind of made his thought popular, and I don't mean popular dumbed down, but accessible to the average reader, is Luke Burgess. I always throw people at Luke's book. It's called Wanting. The subtitle is Mimetic Desire in Everyday Life, I think. It's an excellent book. 5-star reviews from all over the world in this book. And the premise of mimetic desire, which Gerard also called mimesis, is that we are made to imitate others. We talk about the imitation of Christ. Well, we want to be part of the cool kid crowd. We like scapegoating people. We like office gossip. We like bandwagons. We like trends. We like really fierce fads. Remember the ice bucket challenge?
Yeah.
Stupidest thing in the world. Throw ice cold water on yourself, allegedly to raise money for ALS. Well, it didn't really move the needle on that research, but it did provide people like this is a bandwagon. I want to be part of this. I want to be part of it, even though it's totally
the black
uncomfortable.
square after George Floyd.
Yeah,
Everyone
black square.
so I don't the black
Yep.
square. Everyone had to post on Instagram after George Floyd. That was it. Because I'll admit something here. My wife posted it not knowing what it was, and I said, "Why did you post that?" She goes, "I don't know. Everybody's post." I said, "Take that thing down right now. You don't even know what you're doing. Get out of this group thing."
Oh yes, stand with Ukraine. Pray for Paris. And there's like, hey, why don't you? Do you hate black people? Why isn't your square? Put your square up.
Yeah.
Pure mimesis. Yeah. And so when they see a swarm as I call it the teenage subway swarm that happened to me and to Hope is Fuel, that gets people's attention. Oh, it's safe now to attack Patrick. I think I'll attack him too. I'll actually do a 5-minute video against me as Jenny Roback Morse did, getting everything I believe about B16 wrong. But that doesn't matter because there's that virtue signaling thing that people, it's like catnip. They have to do it, it seems. The ultimate example of mimetic desire is what happened in Holy Week, where the innocent savior was scapegoated by everybody. So it became all against one, and all the rage of the world and all our sins were cast on his shoulders, and he was expelled from the city and where he was crucified.
Yeah.
So the killing of Christ the King is the kind of the ultimate example of mimetic desire. You also see this in sports fights. Like if I grew up playing competitive hockey, and if you watch a fight in hockey, usually it's a buildup of several games or several incidents. Maybe some of the guys, dropped their gloves and got to it, and there's this really intense rivalry. Well, if it's a bench clearing brawl, or even if it's just a single fist fight, the sight of blood on the ice, like if someone really gets attacked and injured, that is the end of it. There's this silence that goes through the whole rink, and that was the expulsive moment. It's like all the tension is exorcised through that clash, and this is the clash that people try to artificially gin up. Another example of mimetic desire happened in the Vietnam War with the My Lai massacre. You may have heard of that.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Calley, they just opened fire for like 4 hours on this killing spree. There were no VC soldiers there, and they were like killing elderly and kids and families that had nothing to do with the war. That's groupthink. It explains why people stand around watching a sexual assault and do nothing, because individually they're appalled that they're doing it. And actually, now I don't know about the 3 priests and nobody did anything when your heart attack, unfortunate story, that may have been at play there too, because you have to break a taboo to stand up and be the one to go first. So once that first person goes over the hill, over the top, then people go, oh yeah, that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You want to pray that you're that first guy, because hope is really contagious. Courage is contagious. So let's have people imitate the right things. Nothing wrong with imitating.
What was the thought process for you when you said, "Okay, I have to say this publicly," because I'm not kidding. I think there are a lot more people who hold your thesis, but do not have the courage to say it. I do. I think there are many people who believe a certain thing about Francis, but they know if they said publicly what they really believed, they would be turned into the Patrick pariah. So, did you have to think this over before you came out publicly with it, or did this come kind of naturally for you?
Well, not really. I don't consider myself extra brave. I get nervous. I have insecure feelings. I don't want to lose my livelihood. I knew there would be pushback. I knew the pariah thing would be in play. I didn't know to what extent. And I didn't know how long-term it would be. But I think the thesis just keeps vindicating itself over and over. And I don't want to pray that things get worse, but they are getting worse.
Yeah.
And I think things are coming to that rock bottom crisis point that you alluded to, where people, okay, the scales fall. This does not make any sense. I've got to stop. I have to stop pope-splaining to myself. Because I know I have a fair amount of evangelical friends, and they're all like, oh yeah, no, it's just he can't be the real pope. This guy's obviously a communistic Marxist. He's against the simple gospel of Jesus Christ. And I'm like, you're outside the Catholic fold and you see it clearly.
It's funny, because for all the talk of ecumenism, it's like you've never had somebody. I mean, all of my interactions with Protestants have been, oh, really? Because when you're as a Catholic, you're trying to argue that, okay, well, look, the Pope is this, the Pope is this, and then they just throw you some quote Francis, and you're like, oh, look, I know, but like this is different. Yeah. Like, and they're like, oh, really? Is it different? This is, and they make the assumption that this has always gone down throughout history, but we are in a very unique scenario right now that I don't know how to make sense of it. I don't know how to explain it. I don't know if you're right. I don't know if you're wrong. I don't know.
Well, people can check out my interviews with Matthew Hanley, who's the former award-winning Catholic ethicist. He used to be with the National Catholic Bioethics Center. He did 2 pieces in Front Page magazine. The book Pope Emeritus ? The Always is Also a Forever. There's lots out there. Probably more to come. I'd like to see more canon lawyers get the bloodhound sent here. I'm not a trained canon lawyer, but a lot of canon lawyers are part of the Borg. They work for dioceses, so their paycheck is contingent on them being on that leash, right? Just like the whole EWTN mainstream Catholic Incorporated, they're all afraid of their own precious reputations, and they've got donor phobia. That's.
Did you used to be on that circuit? Were you on the Catholic speaker circuit? Like, did you used to go to parishes and give talks and stuff?
All the time. I shared the stage with all the people that I could list. Yeah, yes, very.
When did that stop? Because there definitely is, like, you still see a lot of those guys are able to. I mean, I think George Weigel is still giving the same talk that I heard on Lighthouse Catholic Media 15 years ago, as if we're still under John Paul II right now. It's like, what year are you in, George? What's going on?
It's the ecclesial equivalent of living in a September 10th world.
It's so strange, and even look at the regular world around us. How much it's changed since Francis has come into the papacy. I mean,
one of the presenters at Hope is Fuel is Father Jeff Langan. He's the Catholic chaplain at a place called Harvard University, and his whole session is on how Catholics today still use 1980s categories to try to understand the world today.
Yeah,
where John Paul II and Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, all those the paradigmatic realities there have shifted entirely. And more Catholics on secular campuses like Harvard are more and more based. They're super red pilled. He had 30 baptisms from his Newman Center at Harvard. That's like a ginormous, like sprawling parish of thousands of families. Yeah. So something's going on. People, Zoomers, people under 30, they don't have those old boomer categories. It's of no interest to them. They don't care. They don't know who Walter Cronkite is. Yeah. They're not fighting the fist fights of second wave feminism. They just want to know what's true, and they have an eye for true north, which is why I love interviewing people like Naomi Wolf. I've interviewed Jordan B. Peterson 4 times, Robert Kennedy Jr. I mean, lapsed Catholics. I've interviewed atheists.
You interviewed Gavin McInnes, which I thought was one of the. Everybody was like, I can't believe Patrick's interviewing Gavin McInnes. Like, first off, Gavin, I don't know where he is with his faith right now, but Gavin, like, his whole the stupid Proud Boys thing really did start with Gavin encouraging people to stop looking at pornography and to get married young. Like, that was the origins of Proud Boys. It never was about politics even. And it was like, I've always been impressed by the people you've chosen to have on your show that are outside of the mainstream box. It really, especially during COVID, I mean, to have Robert F. Kennedy come on and then winds up now he's running for president.
Yeah. I call them outsider insiders.
Yeah, these are people that actually do like even I said because I spoke with Eric Sammons recently about Dave Smith. Dave Smith's he's a libertarian, but he probably will be the libertarian candidate. But he was on Tim Pool's show and he started talking about abortion, and he's like, abortion really kind of is the centerpiece of the leftist ideology, because without it, the whole sexual revolution. No, he's thinking like a Catholic. He's Jewish, but he's thinking like a Catholic. And I think that we're in a period of time now where it's never been easier to point out to people the absurdity of not being Catholic. If you just look around the world, everything collapsing.
Yeah, and you see just in that example there, that's a culture in free fall. He can see the damage and he notices trends. And the trend is the left's fetish for abortion. It's so obvious that people outside the Catholic fold can see something going on there. Raquel Welch, the 60s, 70s sex symbol icon, wrote an essay in 2010 for CNN. And she blamed her 4 marriages and all her life mistakes and the fact that, hey, where are we going? Why are we in this handbasket? To birth control.
Yeah.
Birth control was the Pandora's box that allowed not only abortion, but the LGBT and the Obergefell-Hodges decision. My first book's called The Contraception Deception. It goes back to the truce of 1968. When Paul VI wrote this document, this encyclical Humanae Vitae, it was ignored, it was derided, and bishops refused to discipline theologians and confessors who dissented. There was no disciplining of these priests. So the teaching went underground, and thanks be to God, it's now kind of, it's finding its footing again because things are so bad.
Like I said, Calvin Robinson actually mentioned that book. He said, like, that book changed his whole mind on, really, listen, once you understand once you understand the idea of, once you separate sex from the conjugal act, it's like what we're seeing now is inevitable. It's inevitable. It was
Catholic men who have their wives on birth control, or they make that decision as a couple, have made their wives into an elaborate masturbation tool.
Yeah.
And how do you argue against sex with a tree or a goat? I'm not saying that to be provocative. The logic of it is ironclad. You cannot argue against any other form of sexual perversion if you've already, in your intention, decided that sex can be shorn from conception. You have what Germain Grisey calls a practical hatred of the new human person. Not an emotional hatred, but you foresee, look, if we have the sex act, conception's possible. So we're going to have the sex act and act against the coming to be of that new human person. And that's why the Griswold versus Connecticut decision of the Supreme Court in 1965 was the foundation for Roe v. Wade in the argument that there's a right to privacy as a penumbra in the Constitution, which is absurd. So that's the birth control is the taproot of trans, of the normalization of hardcore pornography, the gay rights movement, so-called, and abortion. It all stems to contraception.
Now, it's all those things, and they all are rooted in that. But at the same time, I think that we are seeing a return of these ancient demons that once roamed the earth, because you could really see, like in the drag queen story hour, for instance, if you look at the priests of Cybele were castrated men who wore women's clothing, who people brought their children to go and see. So you're starting to see that people are actually worshiping these ancient gods, but they don't know that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
But it really, once you don't have a sacramental understanding of the world and your intellect is no longer enlightened by the sacraments, you see how far your intellect gets darkened, and you see that in everyday life.
Do you know where this is reflected? In two scenes in The Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson. I want to get to Mel in a second. One scene is the appearance of Jesus in front of Herod at the order of Pontius Pilate. Remember that? He's standing there, he's like mute as a lamb, and Herod's kind of taunting him with this kind of little girlish makeup. There's one shot after another of the people in that room, and half of them look like trannies. They're like weird, ambisexual, strange, and they all have this sort of gaunt look, and they're like staring at our Lord as if to say, "Can you get me out of here?" And a lot of them, they can't meet eye contact, and they kind of look away.
I have to go back and watch that now.
Yeah, that scene is pretty riveting. All the cast of characters, there's like a leopard on a leash. It's all kind of weird, like subliminally an orgy just happened or something crazy like that.
Even his portrayal of Satan as androgynous like that, how prophetic.
That was the second point, Anthony. Yeah, he cast this Italian actress playing Satan. Satan's trans. This is 20 years ago. He kind of saw, and that's, he probably wasn't intentionally being a prophet, but that image of the androgynous Satan was
that was such a prophetic interpretation of what Satan is. And it's like, you guys, you really have to think about, this is when did he make that movie? 02, 03? It's like,
it came out in 04.
This was unheard of back then, right? Like, we weren't dealing with, it was like, we hadn't even gotten to we were still at the Seinfeld, well, there's not that there's anything wrong with that. Like, that's where we were at that point in time. So to go from that, and Mel really did have a deep insight, I think, at least. Either that, or maybe he was being, inspired from somewhere. Yeah.
So can I mention Mel? Because it applies to the Hope is Fuel. By the way, it's hopeisfuel.com/events.
Yes, I'm sorry, Patrick. I'm terrible.
That's all right, no problem. I want to see, we don't talk about any of this in the course. That's the irony. This is all one big fat distraction from jaw-dropping, really life-changing conversations, all of them. From
I just real quick,
yeah.
I actually purchased my subscription to Hope is Fuel on Friday. Patrick set it up in a way where you could do 4 payments. You don't have to do it all in one lump sum. It's actually really well done. And so you're saying more speakers are going to be added to that list, though, that I've already seen on there.
Yes,
I'm
100%.
excited now. That's great.
Yeah,
there's a couple in there that I'm already excited to listen to. So
yeah, we're going to build this up over time. We call it our signature Catholic course. So it will always be added to. We might switch to a membership model. We're not sure. If we wanted to make money off this, we would have done something totally different with our lives. This is about getting the word out and literally providing hope. Ryan, my business partner, who'd be a great guest for you, by the way, he can tell the whole story of how he bought this URL back in 2014, hopeisfuel.com. Yeah. And when he and I began to finish each other's sentences on how this lack of hope is one of the universal things in this world. The far left is lacking in hope. Daily mass going TLM Catholics are lacking in hope. We all have this in common. There's this pall of despair, whether it's Chinese spy balloons or Biden or a laptop and UFOs. The 24/7 fear porn machine is like relentless. And that's what we decided to punch in the face and be some kind of antidote.
The way we've been handling that is really trying to explain to people that the story of Judas is very baked into the story of Christianity. Mm-hmm. So I think when people are seeing the things that are happening now, they're losing their minds and they're like, why is this happening? Why? Because you have to understand that Cain kills Abel. You have to understand that Joseph gets sold into slavery by his own brothers. And you have to understand that Judas, Christ's brother, sells him for 30 pieces of silver. And what we're witnessing right now is a Judas hour. And this is very much part of the Christian story. And God chose us to be alive during this time. Don't think you're in some horrible time to live. There's never been a more exciting time to be Catholic.
Yeah, I agree.
We should be striving for sainthood more than ever, because where sin abounds, grace abounds even more.
You're singing my song. Absolutely. Crisis. It's a Chinese phrase. A crisis does not build character; it only reveals it. And you can change your character. It just takes the decision to change your character. My late great spiritual director, Father Bob Bedard, part of his morning prayer was, "Lord, today I'm not ready, but I'm willing."
Rob,
so back to Mel. Just to Mel.
Finish your Mel story. I'm sorry.
Just let me get to the finish line. This is something I have to credit Tim Gordon. He came up with it when Ryan and I were on a show a couple of weeks back, and it's really brilliant. If you imagine any of the EWTN, relevant radio, or professional Catholic class that have shows or have blogs, what would happen if Mel Gibson's press agent said, "Mr. Gibson would love to come on your show. Would you like to talk about the sequel to The Passion of the Christ?" They would wet themselves with ecstasy, right? Well, wait a second. You want to associate yourself with someone who's been called an anti-Semite 10 million times, who's drumroll, an actual Sede Vacantis?
He's the embodiment of Patrick and E. Michael Jones all in one, this evil character. You're going to tell me this one Catholic wouldn't be jumping at the opportunity to have a conversation with Mel Gibson?
Yeah, so the difference between Patrick Coffin and Mel Gibson kind of answers itself. I need to crank out some A-list movies and maybe give more respect.
I'll just say this, Patrick, from early on in my faith, you've always been somebody who had a very big hand in teaching me my Catholic faith, and
Thank you, Anthony.
Hours upon hours of entertainment while I'm sitting in traffic on the Long Island Expressway. And it's kind of strange to be speaking to some, because I'm not even it's a weird thing to say I'm a fan of yours, because I really just think you're a fellow Catholic who happens to have a very good talent of having good conversations, doing really good research, and I've admired you from a distance for a very long time. I'm so happy I got the chance to talk to you.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah,
we're definitely going to get into some questions from the audience, because Rob starred a whole bunch of them. So, Rob, why don't you go through some of those?
Okay, well, first, since we were talking about Rene Gerard, who do you like more, Rene Gerard or Marshall McLuhan?
Oh boy, what a great question. I have to go with Marshall McLuhan, not just because he was born in Canada as I was. Rene Gerard changed his views quite a bit. He admitted he was wrong on the nature of Christ's sacrifice. So I credit him with humility. Sometimes people at that top 1% PhD ivory tower thing, they're not exactly open to being wrong, but Monsieur Gerard was. And I think as insightful, I hate to say which one I like better, because they're both very profound thinkers. Marshall McLuhan has been, I think he wrote for more years. I think he produced more books. And I had the chance to interview his son, Eric, may he rest in peace, who was kind of handing the McLuhan baton forward in his work. The reason I appreciate Marshall McLuhan so much is that he was talking about things decades ago that people were like, this doesn't, where are you going with this? Like in 1962, he wrote a book called The Gutenberg Galaxy, where he essentially described the internet long before it ever arrived, before Al Gore invented it, you know? So, his insight into the medium is the message. The medium is the message is such a rich, compressed 4 words. And I believe that Paul VI had a Marshall McLuhan book on his nightstand because McLuhan was made a consultant to the Pontifical Council for Social Communications, and in 1973. In 75, Evangelii Nunciandi came out, which is the apostolic exhortation on evangelization. I think it's the best thing that Paul VI wrote. It's better written than Humanae Vitae is. Yeah. And I think it's number 22 of that document. I could be wrong, but he talks about that people will accept Catholics who are teachers of the faith only if they're witnesses. Now, how does that fit to the medium as the message? Well, you are by your decisions, by your kindness, by your patience, your life is a walking homily for people who are not going to read the catechism. So the message of the gospel is how you are, your character, your vices and your virtues. McLuhan also said that the answer to every problem is inside the problem. So think about the problem of the crucifixion. Well, the answer to it is inside it. It's in the person of Christ, who knows that in 3 days, the Father's going to raise him to glory. And what looks like failure is actually the beginning of the whole new creation, where the worst evil, not just that has happened, that could ever happen, did happen in the murder of God on the cross, which led to the greatest imaginable good, the redemption of the world and our salvation. So, yeah, McLuhan's just endlessly fascinating. He's got a lot of really paradoxical isms that just kind of, they're like mind candy to me. So
yeah, I love those.
I'm in the McLuhanism. I'm in the McLuhan camp for that reason.
What do you got next, Rob?
Is there someone that you wouldn't have as part of like the Hope is Fuel conference, for whatever reason? For instance, like Don's probably not serious with this. He likes to joke, but yeah, I mean, just out of curiosity, like where would you draw the line personally?
Well, if the question is, would I have someone at the Hope is Fuel event, that course? Yeah. James Martin would be a strong no. I have invited James Martin to debate me many, many, many times on Twitter, back channel. Let's have a conversation. He won't engage. So I don't have any allergy to appearing in a conversation with James Martin. I just know that he will never do it. He's a sniper from behind the shrubbery. I can't even believe I have to say this at this point. I probably wouldn't have a pedophile. Probably, a murderous commie bastard, probably not going to happen.
No, but let me jump in real quick, because so many of your problems that you're catching right now could have been solved by just taking E. Michael Jones out of it. Because more people were turned off by E. Michael Jones's position than you, I think. But the two of you together, it was the whole Mel Gibson thing, right? It's like, you stood tall and said, "I'll never take my friend and this person out because I won't follow this mimetic desire that you all have."
Yeah, I've never met him. I believe in open discourse and proving people wrong. He wasn't even talking about any of the controversy. He was talking about how we know God has a plan for your life. And Francis doesn't occupy any of the content of any of the speakers, maybe one casual reference, but that's not what this course is about. This is about intentional discipleship. And I have to wonder, just the 11th hour timing of all the white noise and all this kind of strange persecution, who was behind that? Preternaturally speaking, because the enemy does not want us to have hope. He wants to keep us afraid, because if we're afraid, we're manipulable to the cabal running this whole show. So we believe in punching fear in the face. We don't want people to be average. We want them to be magnificent, and not the best version of themselves, but a new creation. Jesus didn't come so we could do some self-improvement. He came to make us whole. And the sacraments, especially confession, is heart surgery. It's not a car wash. So we want people to take their baptism seriously. And with that comes something you alluded to earlier, Anthony, and that is in the footnote or the fine print of your baptism certificate, there's a little reminder. Christ says, if the world hates me, it's going to hate you too. Yeah. So persecution like this is a sign of something going right. Don't be afraid of it. It's just part of it. And if you feel afraid, just do the right thing anyway. That's courage. Feeling afraid and doing the right thing anyway. What's chastity? It's feeling sexually tempted, but not doing anything, but staying chaste. What is patience? Feeling like you want to throttle the guy, but you don't. So the virtue becomes active in the presence of its opposing vice. And the same thing goes with fear and courage.
Yeah.
That was a long answer. I hope that would help.
What do you got next? Rob? You got any other good ones?
I don't know if you're familiar with the vision that was had by a Colombian nun. I think it was earlier this year.
Yeah, correct. Bogus.
But okay.
Yeah.
You think it's bogus?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm always weary of apparitions unless they, except for Fatima and the ones that are approved by the church. Like, I think a lot of times people go chasing these things way too often. They get too caught up in them. They get end times hysteria. I don't think you need to have any of that to really understand, okay, we're in a moment right now. This isn't about apocalyptomania. This is about just really seeing that, look, we're in a very specific part of the Christian story. That could still mean there's 300-400 years left, could mean 4,000 years left. Doesn't matter. We're in some kind of unveiling at the moment is my stance on it.
Yeah, I agree in full. We don't need it.
Okay.
Let's see. I guess I'm not sure what this is referring to, but maybe one or both.
Okay, so James Lindsay does a lot of work on the woke stuff. So he actually recently watched a Father Ripperger talk on how the demonic and communism, like the demonic is behind communism. So I guess that's what this question is about. What do you guys think of James Lindsay? Do you see that he's been talking about Father Ripperger's demonology talks on the one hand, while going hard against Christian nationalism on the other hand?
Yeah, I'm not that familiar, but I've been following him for a while. I think he's got a lot of really interesting insights. He's obviously open-minded. He's listening to Father Chad Ripperger. And so he's taking all of the content of actual Catholicism and he's grappling with it and he sees that it makes sense. The Christian nationalism thing is one of those other it's a devil term. And some people, they don't analyze beneath it. Sedevacantism is a devil term. Anti-Asian hate is a devil term. Yeah. All the accusation of racism, it's often just a devil term to neutralize or shut down debate. But like Jordan B. Peterson, Jordan knows where true north is. He's on a journey. Just let people be imperfect in the way they discover things. It took me a long time to sort out all the Francis stuff.
We had Tom Holland, who's a secular historian, went into and he wrote the book Dominion. And I know I'm going to catch flack from people for not pushing back on some of his ideas.
Anthony, your Italian hands is causing your camera to focus in.
Oh, all right. I'm sorry. It's like we wound up getting to the root of something that he said during COVID. He started living according to the liturgical calendar. So this is a guy who went into writing this book as an atheist, then becomes agnostic. Then he's now attending church services and living according to the church calendar. It's like, sometimes it's not worth it to be combative to a person like that and kind of just let their journey unfold and let them experience Christ. And I mean, I'm pretty sure Christ is at work in that man's heart already. He doesn't need me telling him how wrong he is on his thing.
Correct.
So
John 4, the woman at the well.
Yeah.
What is this is a beautiful line from my spiritual father, Archbishop Sheen. What does divine purity itself have in common with a woman with 5 husbands? The answer, a love of cold water on a hot day. That's the basis of their conversation. And he just lets her go from hey buddy to sir to master to Lord, just by listening to her and letting her just kind of pour her heart out with gentleness. There's a saying attributed to Plato, and it's be kind to everyone you meet, because everyone you meet is fighting a great battle.
Yeah. Let me tell you something. Yesterday I went to my every time I see my in-laws, I have a tendency to try to evangelize them every time I go.
Yep.
And I promised my wife, I'm like, all right, I'll leave it alone this time. I won't do it. And my brother-in-law tells me, He goes, hey, Aunt, I just want you to know my neighbor came over yesterday and gave me this book called The Warning. Now, this book, The Warning, is about the illumination of conscience and stuff. But when my sister read this book, and she went from living in living with her fiance as basically a concubine to breaking off her engagement and going and discerning a vocation to become a nun. Now, my sister is now, she applied for an aspirancy. She just got her psych evaluation done. So to me, I'm saying, how can this be God not intervening in some way that he wants? I mean, I went in saying, I'm not going to talk about God today. When he mentioned that was it. The conversation started. And they're never tense conversations. They're always led with curiosity on his part. And I mean, I'm really praying for my in-laws' conversion now. That's it.
That's cool. It's possible to be annoyingly Catholic. Just wait for the open door. You know, Catholics love 1 Peter 3:15. Always have a ready reason for those who ask you the faith that's in you or the hope that's in you.
Yeah.
Well, what is he saying? Be ready.
Yeah.
Not bring it up constantly.
Yeah.
You know, if you have an open door, okay, now the horse is thirsty. Now you can offer the cold water to the horse or to the woman at the well. That's a really good analogy.
You got any other good ones, Rob?
Well, I know you had mentioned that you're not really big into the end times, sort of prophecy and mindset. So I don't know if that needs to be answered more fully.
So I believe we're in the final end times, or does he? I think we're only going through yet another cycle of tribulation, apostasy. The answer is I put away my crystal ball for good and forever. I don't know the answer. I do know there are certain signs that sacred scripture says will accompany the return of Christ, like the great apostasy. That's clear. You look at the massive loss of faith all over Europe in formerly strongholds of Catholicism like Malta, Ireland, Quebec, the whole bulk of the Americas. It's just all fallen into lukewarm mush and practical atheism. That's the great apostasy, I think. There's no great rush for Jews to become Catholics, at least not yet. Paul says in, I think it's Romans 9, that in the end, before Christ returns, all Israel will be saved. Don't quite see that. There are wars and rumors of wars, earthquakes, famines. That gets a little bit tricky. You have to discern the signs of the times because of the internet, events happen with the same frequency, but they're reported on instantly from all over the world. So that gives the appearance, oh my gosh, can you believe this? Another tornado. Well, yeah, you just know about that one. They've been happening at the same kind of, I guess, frequency. So, I don't know the answer. We are in the end times, since the incarnation is the announcement of the end times. We've always been in that mode. We're waiting for Christ to return. But that becomes something you mentioned earlier, Anthony. People get itchy ears about this. And there's almost like a temporal arrogance where we want these special biblical times to be our times. And we start to see it everywhere, even if it's not there.
Why do you think that is? Like, I have this theory that no generation is comfortable with life going on perfectly fine after they're gone. Like, every generation is like, it's very uncomfortable at the idea of the world just existing for 1,000 years after I'm gone. I really think that everyone is so like maybe just self-centered that they're like, no, I'm in the end times. Everything's going to be gone after I'm gone.
Yeah. I have this special lollipops and fancy pants. This is my time, and either I'm going to be part of the heroic fight to defeat evil or whatever. It reminds me of another quote attributed to Napoleon, and it's the cemeteries are filled with indispensable men. So a little bit of humility goes a long way.
Yeah. Do you have any other good ones, Rob?
That's really about it.
Patrick, man, I'm first off, I mean, I reached out to you. You answered me right away. I'm like, we really have nothing to offer you. We're a small little channel, and I really am grateful that you came on. And it's really exciting to talk to someone who really did have such a huge impact on my faith and my reversion and so much entertainment through the years. So, okay. So guys, Hope is Fuel. We have the do you still do the Patrick Coffin show though? Because the last one I saw up was 6 months ago.
Yeah, I'm going to be giving that a jolt of champagne at some point soon. Yeah, I'll have fresh content out. That's I'm trying to sort that out, because Hope is Fuel has made Ryan and I, my co-founder, sip water from a fire hydrant. But we're going to get that. We're also going to do other specialized courses, and we might adopt a different model for those. Like our next event. It's going to be 4 or 5 physicians and alternative healthcare providers that are not providing official medical advice, but it's called we think we're going to go with Hope is Fuel Vaccine Regret. What can you do if you got the injection and you regret it, and you're scared about myocarditis, you're scared about, threats to fertility or whatever it is? There are things that can be done, and we want to provide people with hope from that, because this is an international problem of
I would say
vaccine
the
regret.
biggest fear with that shouldn't be what are even the side effects. The biggest fear you should have from that is, will you be strong enough to stand up the next time they try to force something on you? Because that was the whole purpose of that thing, was to get you, who knew something was off with that, and force you to go against what you knew was wrong, because they were preparing you for something. So if
Totally
you gave
true.
in the last time, you really need to figure out why you gave in and what is going on with that.
That would be an excellent presentation. The psychological wearing you down. And I don't know why, Anthony. I'm not a genius. I'm not a prophet or the son of a prophet. But I figured out in the spring of 2020 that this mask was a proxy dress rehearsal of compliance for a jab that was going to arrive. If you're gonna impede your breathing over this thing for such a relatively benign condition for most people, then you're going to be a complete sucker for the vaccine push when it comes. And it came.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So if you didn't have it in you to say no to the mask, then you didn't have it in you to say no to the jab. And all I'm saying is, look, we know now what we know now. Clearly, this thing was not what they said it was. So if you gave into that, you need to really prepare yourself for whatever they're going to bring us next. They're going to bring something next. It's not, what do you think they're done? You think they set up this whole infrastructure for what they did during that to just say, okay, we don't need it anymore, and that's it? No, that was all a preparation for something that's coming down the road, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for the invite. And don't call me a fan, Anthony. I prefer worshiper.
Patrick, thank you so much for giving us your time. Hang out, and we're going to talk in the green room for 1 second. Rob, take us out.
Okay.